Studies confirm that principals are a key factor in whether students achieve and schools improve. In 2010, Illinois passed a bold plan that changed the requirements for earning a principal's license. The new rules are based on research about effective programs and require candidates to spend much more time getting hands-on experience in schools. One of the inspirations was the approach that the University of Illinois at Chicago took in preparing school leaders.
We started our program about 13 years ago, and some of the key innovations are things like a full-year paid residency for all of our principal candidates before they receive licensure, intensive coaching before they receive licensure, but also after they receive licensure, so they remain in the program. A third one would be, and perhaps most fundamental, is a partnership with Chicago Public Schools, because we don't believe that a higher ed institution can do this alone without a strong partnership. Finally, a very strong series of assessments so that we're constantly assessing the development and progress of our people, which leads to maybe 10% or more over time being counseled out of the program. We decided on the architecture of an EDD degree instead of a master's degree, which is standard in the field, so that we could have our hooks into people for several years. They begin the program in a way that looks similar to traditional programs with a semester of coursework. But immediately after that semester of coursework, they enter a full-year paid residency. So they're earning more than a teacher's salary, as a rule, by serving as essentially an assistant principal in a school in which a mentor principal has agreed to mentor them.
I made a decision to host a resident principal based on feedback from some of my colleagues about the program that UIC had put forth and the quality of the resident principals that they were seeing. Just standard principal certification programs deal so much with philosophy and best practices, but being able to actually put those philosophies and best practices into work and to see what works, what does not, what needs to be changed, allows the resident to gather great experience around what a principalship truly is.
The resident principals are visited at least once a week by trained coaches, chosen for the record of success as principals. They help the residents carry out a leadership development plan that describes their goals for the year.
We would like it if we could attract mid-career principals, let's say 50 years old, to come in as coaches, or 45 years old who had really had a track record of success as a transformational principal. But the truth is, the salary structures in public schools versus universities are such that we've not been able to attract highly successful principals out of the principalship until they're ready to retire.
You have to have somebody that has experienced this. They've gone through the change process themselves. They've actually led change. They've actually developed the adults in the school to improve outcomes for kids. That they've actually been on the ground level and brought people together with differing opinions to really come up with a strategic plan. And if you haven't experienced that yourself, if you haven't lived it, it's very difficult to give feedback just based on the literature alone to the principal resident that's trying to enact change in their school.
So the big thing that I wanted to avoid was saying this isn't good, it needs to be better. Because I don't think that changes practice. And if teachers knew what to do to be better, they would do it, I think. Exactly. So the frame I used was, I literally put on the slide, mid-year data is not meant to stress us or send us into a panic. It's meant to inform our instructional next steps. And so my big idea was that the way you go from stress and panic to informing instruction next steps is that you have to dig in to the students and to the learning outcomes that aren't showing the growth we want.
Exactly.
So that was the frame I used, and pretty much I said it exactly the way I said it to you.
How'd they respond to that?
The room still felt heavy. I think also because I didn't, and these are things that I've decided are important to me, I didn't put anybody's data on the screen. Okay. I don't think that's necessary. Everybody knows their individual data because I'd had those meetings beforehand, which was a a strategic move on my end to make sure that people know the data, but that I'm not publicly humiliating or publicly embarrassing or putting people in a difficult position. I don't want to do that. At the beginning of the year, I shared with my coach very proudly a very detailed plan for professional development around rigorous instruction. And she said, well, that's great, Shirley, but where are the people? And just that little nudge are the things that you need to start to realize that the work isn't about curriculum, it's not about the details, it's about the people in the building and your ability to relate to them and to help them connect with a vision and work with you.
2 of our coaches are funded by the university straight out, and 3 of our coaches are funded on soft money. Our goal over time is to see the university fund these leadership coaches at even a fraction of the level that it funds student teaching coaching, which is something that's already long established in universities, whereas principal coaching is not.
The program requires a partnership with the Chicago Public Schools as a co-provider. Research has shown that this produces effective school leaders. That's a big switch for universities to make.
One of the things that attracts people to the professorship is the autonomy that's provided. Well, if you're working with a public school system, you can't just be autonomous and expect the public school to come to your office when you're good and ready. You really have to live by the rhythms of the school system, and sometimes that means dropping everything to deal with a problem or deal with a meeting that needs to be called by the school system. And so learning to be good partners is one of the challenges to higher ed if we're going to partner effectively with school districts.
They put a heavy emphasis on continuous improvement, setting goals, being strategic around reaching those goals. But more importantly, once you reach those goals, setting a new goal and pushing forward on the next open door. I've trained several principals throughout my tenure, and the one thing that I always tell them is that I don't care which goal you meet, you should be setting another goal because the world is constantly changing, so we can't rest on our laurels. We celebrate when we meet a goal, but you have to continuously improve because that's what this district demands.
More than 3/4 of UIC principals lead high schools where the vast majority of students are both low income and of color. These high schools outperform similar Chicago neighborhood schools in keeping freshmen on track to graduate and increasing graduation rates. Elementary schools with principals prepared by UIC outperform neighborhood schools in student growth on reading and math assessments.
The UIC program has been deliberate in not just building my knowledge around literacy, instruction leadership, or mathematics, instructional leadership, or budget and accounting. It's really focused on developing my interpersonal skills because they're well aware that a principal is not just a technocrat who decides what curriculum should be. The principal is the heart of a building, and when that principal is able to establish positive relationships across all stakeholders, then that building transforms from just a building and turns into a community that allows children to succeed.